Hey folks, this is David Smith at Correctional Officer Lifestyle. I've been threatening to do a video about confinement for a very, very long time. I think I finally got it right. Alright, now I'm not talking about any other agency than the state of Florida. State of Florida Department of Corrections is what I know. It's where I've worked for 27 years. If you're in another state in Florida and you think I say something completely off base, please understand that I am a Florida correctional officer. This is where I have done all of my work, is in the state of Florida. Oftentimes confinement is referred to as segregation in other agencies. Be that as it may, it's confinement. You are confining an inmate from general population. Okay. That being said, I want to go on ahead and give you a brief overview. You have the administrative confinement unit, you have the disciplinary confinement unit, and you have, in the state of Florida, we have something called close management, but that is an entirely different animal. And we also have something called protective management, which there again is an entirely different animal. I want to go on ahead and promote my shirts real quick. Before I really get into this video, you'll notice that I have my Corrections One Team One Fight shirt on. It's got a thin gray line flag on the right shoulder. It's got the Correctional Officer Lifestyle logo on the other shoulder. And it is Corrections One Team One Fight with the thin gray line going through it. So, you want a shirt? Hit me up. Private message me. Hit me on Facebook, Correctional Officer Lifestyle Facebook page. And we'll talk shop. Alright? Let's get into this confinement video. All right. First thing I'm going to talk about is administrative confinement. That is the most prevalent type of confinement that we have at the institution that I work at. Okay. There are various number of reasons that an inmate can be placed into administrative confinement. The number one reason, though, and this is the catch-all reason, I like to refer to it as a catch-all reason because that's kind of what it is. It's the reason that surpasses all others, is the inmate must be segregated from the general population for some reason. Those reasons are what I'm going to explain, but if you have to segregate the inmate from the general population for whatever reason, then you would place him into administrative confinement. Okay? To listen to the inmates talk about it, when an inmate gets mad because you're placing him into administrative confinement and to get him off of your compound, you tell him, I see you as a threat to the security of my compound. The very first thing out of his mouth, transfer me then. Get me off your compound forever. Get me out of here. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. Now, the reason I made mention of that is one of the first reasons that we would place him into confinement is to await transfer. Especially if it is a non-negative or a negative transfer, negative adjustment transfer, or he's just been a booger bear and we need to get rid of him type of transfer. We're going to put him in confinement and let him sit there, okay, until his transfer comes through. That is, number one, to protect him. Number two, to protect other inmates. Number three, to keep him from continually disrupting operations at our institution. Okay. The next thing you would place him in confinement for is to await disciplinary hearing for charges that he has been written up for by correctional officer staff. To await the outcome of an investigation. If you have an investigation, particularly, let's say you have a criminal investigation, you have a crime scene, you have an inmate batter another inmate with a homemade weapon, and you know that he was in the area, he was obviously involved, you don't know to what level he was involved, you're going to take this other inmate that may or may not have been involved, and you're going to place him into the administrative confinement unit so that you can conduct your investigation. These are the types of things that I'm talking about there. Obviously, if the inmate needs to be protected for whatever reason, you would place him into your administrative confinement unit. This is a tool that the inmates use often. I've seen it both ways. I've seen inmates that whenever they just want to transfer, they, in the state of Florida, we call it checking in. They check in. They request protection and they go to confinement. You can always tell if you have access to their history on the computer. You can always tell because you'll have the inmate being at 15 different institutions, and until he got to your institution, he checked in at every institution he went to so that he could get a transfer. Those are the inmates that are abusing the system. Those are the inmates that make it hard for the other inmates that are actually doing the right thing to be taken seriously. Those are the ones that are crying wolf. You likely have some other guys that let's say something got overlooked in a classification, and it happens. I'm not saying that classification does any of this on purpose. They're part of my team. But everybody makes mistakes. Everybody's human. Everybody makes errors. Okay? And let's say the brother of an inmate's victim shows up at the institution where that brother's at, where that man that killed his brother's at. That's a situation where we would definitely want to offer protection for the inmate that is at our facility. So, and of course, any other reason that segregation from population is necessary. And there's a myriad of other reasons, okay? Then you have your disciplinary confinement unit. Disciplinary confinement, if there are disciplinary charges are heard and they have received disciplinary confinement as part of their discipline, then they would be placed into the disciplinary confinement unit. And if they are transferred to your facility with disciplinary time remaining from the facility that they were transferred at, then of course they would serve the rest of their disciplinary time in your disciplinary confinement unit. And that, in a nutshell, is confinement in the state of Florida. Okay, now, what happens to an inmate when they are placed into administrative confinement? Okay, we have three distinct things that I'm going to talk about here. It's the entry process, what happens while they are in confinement, and then what happens to them psychologically while they are in confinement, okay? The entry process. Every inmate that goes into the confinement unit is going to go to medical for a pre-confinement medical examination to ensure that they are healthy and uninjured before you place them into your confinement unit. Once they get into the confinement unit, you're going to give them an unclothed search. You are going to make sure that they are not bringing any dangerous contraband into your confinement unit. You're going to check the cell that you are placing the inmate into to make sure that it is a working cell, that it doesn't have any maintenance issues, and that it's clean. You're going to make sure that the sink works. You're going to make sure that the toilet works. You're going to make sure that the bunks are securely fastened to the wall. There's foot lockers in there. The bunks are clean. The floor is clean. There's no graffiti all over the place. You're going to make sure that the cell is proper before you place the inmate into it, because that's the humane thing to do, okay? And then you're going to take care of the paperwork. I don't know about other agencies, but in the state of Florida, that cell check that I just mentioned is actually part of the paperwork. That is how strongly we believe in not treating inmates inhumanely, by checking the cell first to make sure that it is 100% all right for that inmate to be housed in, okay? The weekly items that are going to happen while the inmate is in confinement, okay, he's going to be weighed once a week. He's going to have regular access to a shower. He's going to have regular access to his health and comfort items, such as toilet paper, suit or soap, toothbrush, toothpaste, sheets, blanket, mattress, pillow, clothing, and footwear. Okay, regular visits from on-duty medical staff, very regular rounds by security staff to make sure that the confined inmates are all right, that they're not injured, that they're not hurt, that they don't have medical issues, okay? We're gonna feed them 3 squares a day. They're gonna have regular access to the legal library in order to work on their cases. They're gonna have regular access to the canteen. Some other agencies call it commissary. We call it canteen in the state of Florida, within obvious restrictions, okay? We're not gonna give somebody something that has to be heated. We're not going to give somebody in a confinement cell something where they have to put hot water in it in order to cook it, i.e. ramen noodles. We're not going to do that because they don't have access to the hot water system that the general population inmates have. We're going to give them access to writing materials, access to the request and grievance procedures, and of course access to a certain amount of out-of-doors recreational activities per week. I'm not going to go into specifics. That's agency policy, and I'm not going to go into specifics. Okay. The psychological toll that confinement has on an inmate. Inmates go through a psychological toll while in confinement that is very, very, very similar to cabin fever. Okay, if you've ever seen a documentary on cabin fever, it is ugly. It is pure ugly. The difference between cabin fever and what we got going on in confinement is there is human companion down there. There is somebody that they can talk to. There is somebody that they are guaranteed to see every time security does a round. On a regular interval. There is medical staff, there's psychological staff, there's mental health staff, there's all sorts of people that regularly go down there to help deal with the cabin fever issue. Okay? It is the correctional officer's responsibility to notice the signs of this and to respond accordingly. Okay? It is not the inmate's job to tell you that he is having psychological issues. If you bring an inmate into confinement and he acts one day, he acts one way one day, the next day he's perfectly normal, the next day he's perfectly normal, the next day he's perfectly normal. You go 3 weeks down the road and this inmate is not acting like himself. Notify somebody. Let somebody know. Let somebody know, because it is possible that that inmate needs help. Okay? We cannot get in the habit of ignoring the signs of psychological trauma in these inmates that are legitimately caused by them being confined. That is inhumane. I was a confinement officer for 14 years. One of my greatest, I will say, assets to me working in the confinement unit was my ability to read an inmate and tell when something was wrong with him. I say that to go on to the next one. Suicide attempts rise in the confinement unit. If you hear of an inmate successfully committing suicide, the chances are high that it was in a confinement unit. Okay? We are limiting it is basically like going to jail while you're in prison. We are limiting their freedom. We are limiting their liberty. We are taking away from the inmate something that the inmate values. That can cause a sense of hopelessness. Hopelessness leads to I have nothing to lose. I have nothing to lose leads to nobody's going to miss me anyway. So on and so forth. Notice the warning signs. Deal with them accordingly. All right? One of the biggest reasons that I personally stress going down there and doing your security rounds is suicide prevention. Absolutely 100% suicide prevention. Now also, you go down there, you have an inmate's got a splitting headache. He says, can I get some ibuprofen? Yeah, I'll bring it back on the next round. That's not cool. Okay? Whenever I was a confinement officer, I always carried medication in my pocket. I carried ibuprofen, Tylenol. Well, at the time I didn't have Tylenol. I carried Tylenol, Sudafed, and throat lozenges in my pocket every round I made. If an inmate asked for something, I'd hand it to him, and I'd get his information put in the log and deal with all the paperwork when I got done with my round. I'm going to borrow a quote from Officer Nelson. It's too easy to do your job. It's too easy to do your job. It's too easy to go out there on the floor and make a round every 30 minutes, carry a little bit of medication in your pocket, hand the inmate medication, come in and do the paperwork, then to listen to the inmate whine and complain because you refuse to do your job. Do your job. Okay? The security rounds are stupid important. The security rounds are where if you get beat because you weren't doing them, then you beat yourself. It's the inmate's job to win. If we give them the tools to win by not doing our job, then we beat ourselves. Okay? Confinement staff. Staff in confinement go through correctional or go through psychological trauma as well from dealing with everything in the confinement unit. At first you won't notice it. At first it won't bother you. At first, it's everything is going to be okay. Man, confinement is outstanding. If I don't go talk to the inmates, they can't come talk to me. They don't come up, tap on the windows, blah, 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 blah. Then you have the first suicide attempt. Then you have the first in-cell disturbance. Inmate kicking on the door, calling you everything but a child of God. Won't shut up. Won't stop. Inmate throws a cup of something on somebody. Inmate throws a cup of something on you. Inmate throws his food at you because you didn't give him what he wanted for chow. These are the things that confinement officers have to put up with on a very regular basis. Okay. I've gone through confinement units and had inmates that when I opened the door to save their lives, they were literally swinging with the door because they had hanged themselves. In all of my time in confinement, both as an officer and as a sergeant, I never had a successful suicide. I was able to identify and prevent every single suicide attempt that I have ever encountered in a confinement unit. There again, that is the ability to read people. And that's one of a confinement officer's greatest strengths. Okay, correctional officers go through psychological toll just as well as the inmates do. You can always tell when a correctional officer is built for confinement. It's easy. It's easy to tell. Number one, when you pull them out of confinement, they're like a fish out of water. They don't know how to act. They can't dial it down. They're often seen as brutish, mean, ill-tempered, can't get along with anybody. And it's just the confinement mentality. It is the confinement mentality. As a confinement officer, you've got to have a bullshit sniffer. You do, and it's got to work. You've got to know when an inmate that tells you, and this was something we hear all the time, I'm going to make you run it. I'm going to make you run it. What that means is the inmate's going to show out until we have to come down there with chemical agents or an extraction team and make him behave. That's what he means when he says, I'm going to run it. It's kind of like the inmate's threatening to drink a bottle of poison and hope it kills me. It makes no sense. There again, that's part of the psychological issue that a lot of these inmates go through when they're in confinement. Some of them are just wired that way. Some of them are just that disrespectful. Some of them are just that out of touch with reality. Some of them are just that, etc., etc., etc. Some of them it's psychological toll. Some of them can be talked down. Some of them, if you get a proper crisis intervention specialist or somebody that is trained to deal with a crisis intervention situation, you can talk them down. You can get them down. You can get them acting right. Okay. A lot of times you can't. And the correctional officer has to deal with this day in and day out. Day in and day out. There are some times that I've been in confinement with some inmates that you just don't want to walk by their cell because you know it's going to be a problem. You got to walk by their cell. But as soon as they see you, they're going to start raising sand. They're going to start banging on the bunk, kicking on the footlocker, and doing everything else they can just to piss you off to get you to come back to that cell and spend more time with them. I don't know why. Okay. But your confinement officers will be the ones that come to work with some of your best attitudes. It's weird. They work in the worst environment at the institution, but when they get to work, they have the best attitudes. They will often be the staff member that people call when they have a problem. They will often be the staff member that people call when they don't know something, when they don't know how to do something, when they're confused about something, or when they just have a situation that they've never experienced before. That confinement officer is often going to be the one that they call. Or a former confinement officer will be the one that they call. Because the confinement officer deals with so much on a very regular basis that a year in a confinement unit is almost like spending 4 years on a compound. It's that level of corrections in a confinement unit. Confinement officers, they're often very popular because we have the best war stories. We really do. Some of the stuff that we have seen in the confinement unit, the general public would hear us telling these stories and be in pure and utter shock that we can be so calm while we're telling the stories. The stuff that a confinement officer sees on a regular basis, the stuff a confinement officer experiences on a regular basis, the general public can't handle. I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm not trying to say I'm better than anybody. I'm telling a God's honest truth. The general public at large cannot handle what occurs in a confinement unit on a regular basis. Just can't. The level of meanness that you will see coming out of some inmates is amazing. I have actually had an inmate tell me, and he was pretty serious about it, that he was going to kill himself. Now, naturally, I didn't leave this inmate alone. I stayed right there with him because we take every threat of suicide seriously. But I can't just stand there. I've been a confinement officer 14 years. I've been a correctional officer 27 years. I can't just stand there. I got to find out what's going on in this inmate's head. I got to find out what's going on in his mind. So I asked him, "What's your plan?" He says, "Oh, I'm going to show out enough to make you kill me." And he was serious. He was truly serious. His plan was to show his tail so much that I would kill him so I wouldn't have to deal with him. That was his plan. That was 100% his plan. To the point where he started beating his back against the wall, screaming over and over again, "Kill me, Captain Smith." That is the level of behavior that we deal with in a confinement unit. Now, naturally, to finish the story off with this guy, we got him the psychological help that he needed. We absolutely got him the mental health help that he needed, and he was since transferred from our institution. I don't know where he went. I don't keep in touch with any of the guys that I have a regular dealing with, mostly because in a confinement unit, most of the regular dealings are negative, and I don't dwell on negative thoughts. But that's the kind of lunacy that you'll deal with in a confinement unit. So, to go into another mindset video, the mindset of a confinement officer is going to be vastly different than the mindset of a regular compound officer. That's just something that's a reality of our business. It is what it is. It's part of the nature of the business. It's the nature of the beast, and we deal with it as it comes. Folks, that's all I've got for confinement. I hope that I have done this justice. I hope that the video helps you. I sincerely hope that you watched it to the end, because a lot of what I said is 100% spot on, necessary for confinement officers. Okay? That being said, folks, if you like this video, make sure you hit the like button. If you want to see more, hit the subscribe button. I am so close to 300. I think I have 291 subscribers right now, or at least I did the last time I checked. I am right next to 300. I would love to have 300 subscribers. So if you would, just hit that subscribe button. That'd be awesome. And then make sure you hit the bell for notifications so that you'll know when I post new videos, which, now that I've got my office configured the way that I want it, new videos are going to be coming a lot more frequently. Folks, there is no place for domestic violence. I say this every single video. I'm going to stress it again. I have another friend that is the victim of domestic violence, and I just want to go on ahead and say domestic violence does not always involve direct violence. Domestic violence can be emotional, financial, physical, mental. Anytime you oppress someone that you love, that is domestic violence. If they are afraid to go on a trip with their family because of the retaliation that you are going to have against them. That is domestic violence. Okay, if you find yourself in a situation like that, or God forbid you find yourself in a situation where you are being physically battered, 1-800-799-SAFE. 1-800-799-7233 is the domestic violence hotline. Call them. They will help you. All right. If you know the aggressor in a domestic violence incident, do not be a knight in shining armor on horseback going over there to save the day. But by God, we've got people in blue uniforms and police cars that can do that. Call them. Say something to somebody. The worst thing you can do is nothing. All right. And if you are the aggressor in a domestic violence incident or situation, I want to let you know there's help for you. Okay. Part of eradicating domestic violence is for you to understand that you need the help and then to get it. Okay. Because the rest of the world understands that you need help and then you need to get it. All right. I am my brother's keeper. I am my sergeant, or my sister's keeper. And yes, I am my sergeant's keeper as well. And love shouldn't hurt. Folks, this is Dave Smith at Correctional Officer Lifestyle. Y'all be safe behind the fence, and I'll see you in the next video.